Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Chrissy Allen, Development Director for Blue Hill Heritage Trust. And joining me up above me, I don't know where she is on your screen, is Martha Bell. And she is one of the outreach education coordinators for Island Heritage Trust. And this is our Friends from the Field webinar, a collaboration between our two organizations. And today, Martha and I are really excited to talk to you about accessibility, what's happening at our organizations, as well as at the state and federal level. If you have any questions throughout the course of this webinar, please feel free to use the chat function, and we will stop and answer your questions along the way or get to them towards the end. We've got a pretty full slideshow presentation to show you. And so I think we're going to go ahead and jump right in and get started. Martha, do you have anything to say before we start?
I think you've covered it all.
Okay, great. All right, let me jump in here and share my screen. Bear with me. Okay. Oops, sorry. Here we go. Okay. Excellent. Can you see that okay, Martha?
I can.
Super. Okay. So today we are going to talk to you folks about Outdoors for All, the importance of making nature accessible to everyone. And this is a photo some of you may have seen if you follow Blue Hill Heritage Trust on social media. This was in August, an opening of an accessible trail that we had. The reason that Blue Hill Heritage Trust has gotten involved in this work actually goes back to 2017, when we were asked to be part of a statewide pilot program that partnered land trusts with an organization called SUFU, Speaking Up for Us. And SUFU is the state's advocacy group for adults with developmental disabilities. And this program encouraged land trusts to help incorporate members of our community who are living with disabilities into our everyday work, into our volunteer opportunities, create programming that would be welcoming for people with disabilities, rather than just special programming that was just for somebody, maybe with a cognitive disability. Run a program that was accessible for everybody in the community, including somebody with a cognitive disability or physical disability. And so that's really what gave us our first taste of this work and the importance of it. And the biggest things that we learned right away were that as a staff of people who do not have any significant disabilities, we were a very bad judge of what was and was not accessible for those who are living with different disabilities. We also realized that we had been wildly underserving this important segment of our community and that we needed to do better. And so we did our best with that pilot program, and we're very proud to achieve some really cool things that I'll be showing you a few of later. And we were asked to present about this at the Land Trust Alliance's National Land Trust Conference. And so the Land Trust Alliance at that time was starting to really look into this area with the land trusts. They were really encouraging land trusts around the country to be more community-based and to really embrace the DEI work that was being done, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of the things that was often being left out of that DEI conversation was accessibility for people with disabilities. And so the Land Trust Alliance, or LTA, as you may hear me refer to them as, really started taking this pretty seriously and looking at the data that existed and did a survey of land trusts. So you can see this data here on the screen shows that about 1 in 4 adults in the United States have some form of a disability, which is a really large number of us. And I think a lot of people don't think about what a disability might be and what it might entail. And so this other graphic really does a good job of breaking it down for you. So it may not mean somebody who uses a wheelchair. It may just mean somebody who no longer is able to live independently because they have some sort of cognitive issue that came on later in life, whatever it may be. And so it really helped pull the veil off this misnomer that there weren't many people with disabilities living among us. So they did a survey for land trusts, and they found back in 2020 that while more than half of the land trusts that answered their survey said that they were developing DEI statements and really thinking about this DEI work, only 32% of those that stated that mentioned disability. So you can see that it just is something that was not on the forefront of what a lot of groups were thinking about at the time. Most groups, when they were thinking about DEI, and rightly so, were focusing on racial equity, LGBTQ, things like that. But this really highlighted for folks that we needed to be including those with disabilities as well. So the Land Trust Alliance formed a council on inclusive health and disabilities, and I was very honored to be asked to be on that council. And we started to work on a guide that we wanted to have as a resource for land trusts around the country, to use as a disability inclusion guide to help them not just understand the importance, but to give them some guidance as to how to become more accessible, whether it be through trails, programming, or at the organizational level itself. And so we started working on this, and it was printed and published in 2021. And this is a living document, as it says at the bottom of that second page. So we are going to be revisiting this document from time to time and updating it and making sure that the most current and best information is available in there. I will say this guide has been really well received in the land trust community, and there have been many webinars like this one specifically for land trust staff that are happening regionally around the country, as well as, you know, at the state level, that are diving into this guide so that land trusts really understand how to use it. And we are starting to see a pretty big wave cresting here across the United States of land trusts that are starting to really look at this issue of accessibility and opening nature up to all. One of the reasons that we really are doing this work is because we understand that just because you have a disability does not mean that you do not deserve and do not want the benefits of nature. That was something that really stood out to me when we were doing our initial work with SUFU, was how enthusiastic these folks were about getting outside, about helping, about giving back, you know, doing trail work or helping to greet people at an event. They just really enjoyed being a part of their community. They wanted to be outside. They loved it. And some people who work with those who have disabilities or are caregivers might argue that somebody with a disability might even have greater joy than somebody who doesn't, because there are so many barriers out there for them accessing various experiences. So this is the daughter of one of the co-authors, Peter Doering, Margot, and she absolutely just loves any time outside. And you can see she's just having a blast. So I wanted to talk for a moment about accessibility, and then we're going to jump into a couple of case studies that are right here close to home, We are going to hear from Martha, and then you're going to hear from me about what our two land trusts are doing. So accessibility is the degree to which somebody with a disability can independently and safely access whatever that thing is. So if it's a trail, it means that you are making sure that you're removing any barriers. And so you can see here two different images. One, you have two women walking with canes or walking sticks. One, a gentleman is using a wheelchair. They're both on two different trails that were designed with them in mind, removing any roots, any rocks, making sure that the parking and the entrance to the trail was suitable for them, and that it was the type of trail that they would be able to come to and do by themselves. And that's a really, really important thing that we oftentimes don't think about, but so often people with disabilities have to rely on their caregivers to be able to go about their daily lives like we would be able to on our own. And so it's really, really nice when you can provide an experience that they can do independently, but also know that they will be safe doing it. So that's a huge, huge part of this puzzle that we're looking at. So a lot of times we mix up equity with equality. And I love this graphic. And this is a graphic that we use in the guide that we produce through LTA. And it really shows the difference. So, you know, equality would be like saying, well, our trails at Blue Hill Heritage Trust are open to everybody, you know, and if people can figure out how to use them, even if they're using a wheelchair with adaptive equipment, which is great, then those trails are for them. So problem solved. We are, you know, we are treating everybody equally. But really what we're talking about is equity. We're talking about making sure that the playing field is even for everybody, with everybody being considered. And so that's a huge, huge part of this. And so, you know, there are a lot of great organizations out there, and there's a lot of great adaptive equipment out there that people can use to access a trail, but it's really, really expensive. And it is putting the burden on the person with the disability to have to access that equipment, or to have to contact your land trust and ask for that equipment, to have to ask for somebody to be with them to help them use that equipment. And it's, if you're thinking about the sort of the cost benefit ratio here, it's way more cost effective for a land trust to raise money to build a trail that's just suitable for everybody to use. And it makes it so that those people can do it independently on their own and feel like they were being considered when we were starting this project. So those are just some things that I think are really important to think about when we are talking about why we're doing these accessibility projects. We're going to talk more about that. But right now, I'm going to turn it over to Martha, and she's going to tell you about a project she's been working on over on the island. Go ahead, Martha.
Thank you. Well, I've been involved with Deer Isle Stonington Elementary School, building a nature trail for about 6 years. Chrissy has jumped into this head on with the accessibility issue and has done a deep dive, but this project that we've done has allowed us to sort of evolve and slowly learn. So as the project started out, we were making boardwalk through a school nature trail, and it was a little bit by little bit through a red maple swamp. And a few years into it, we realized, you know, if we made our trails a little wider, we would be able to accommodate more people. So most of the trail is a little bit, 2 feet wide, but the last part is 3 feet wide. So we learned along the way. And the trail is on Trail Finder, and you can find it there. The kids have a lot of ownership around the project. So this is the entrance over by the tennis courts, where they come in. There's an outdoor classroom being built just beyond that sign that you see in the middle photograph. And other organizations have very much been involved. Haystack has done a lot of projects with their equipment in their Fab Lab, working with students. In the right-hand photo, you'll see Mickey Flores. She's kind of our champion teacher who we have worked very closely with, and none of this would be possible without her energy behind it. And this is when it got a bit wider. So we have places where there's junctures where you can see we have one student that is in a wheelchair here, but sometimes it's just people that are on crutches or grandparents that are coming. So it gets a lot of use by people that normally wouldn't have a chance to use it. These are some signs that Haystack is actually helping to build, but that strip across the top is actually some Braille. And through this project, we're having the kids be much more aware of different accessibility issues. So we'll have this, and we'll also have some sound boxes that will help some animal sounds from the woods. We have bird feeding stations along the way. We've done scientific projects out there. Once we built it, a lot happened. Some students got involved and have done their own scientific research about bird feeding. And then, we get a new idea and something new happens, or we bring in a new collaborator. The kindergarten classes said, we go out and we count the steps every day. And then we said, oh, well, we could put numbers there. And so that happened through Haystack. And then at the other end, we have a loop around a yellow birch tree. There's the alphabet. So the kids are practicing their letters and numbers while they're out on the trail. And students, we have probably 100 students on the trail every single day. The high school got involved. They helped build it at different times. Here, they're putting the numbers on the stairs. We have kiosks. We have 2 outdoor classrooms. One is over by the tennis courts. The other one's deep in the woods. And so the artwork that kids have done is displayed on this kiosk. The left is from some kindergartners and the right is more middle schoolers. Community events have happened. We have the Jack-o'-lantern event that just happened, again, the 2nd annual, I would say. Where kids make jack-o'-lanterns during the day. They're put out on the nature trail, and then the community comes to see the lit up nature trail. So the community is coming to this trail as well. Here they are carving their pumpkins before the big event. More jack-o'-lanterns. Then we also had a luminary event where it was all lit up around holiday time. So it's just a kind of a fun place to be. This is the I Spy on the school nature trail, where the students do an ABC book that's done by the kindergartners. And then we also do a calendar every year, and kids take photographs of things happening on the trail, and then they sell it as a fundraiser for the middle school. Another Haystack project. This is very large. This is at least probably 6 feet across and square, and it has all different organisms that live on the nature trail. Another Haystack project. These are Haystack projects as well. Some of the organisms that they found, and then replicated. Again, these are mobiles. Right in the classroom, but all has been inspired by the outdoors. More experiments and observations. These are transects and quadrats that we use, where the kids are really making observations on a regular basis. I believe this was a lichen study, as we're looking at lichen on the trail. But the kids notice things. Being out that often, they see the seasonal changes. This was different seasons were out there. We have a lot of skunk cabbage out there. So as you can imagine, early in the spring, it's an inch or 2, and it doesn't take long before it's several feet. In the wintertime, we're doing tracks. We're out there all the time. New things are always being developed. Phenology trails, we've done this with all different ages, where they have trails and they document what's happening year to year, and it can be referenced in future years. This was another study that we were doing with soil temperature and skunk cabbage. And we were taking weather data on a regular basis, and actually wrote a scientific paper for the Gulf of Maine Research Institute that was peer reviewed by other middle schoolers. More field identification. The kids are learning the different organisms that are out there because they see them all the time and they see the changes. I guess we'll see this soon, but not quite yet. We're still having an extended fall, but wintertime is a great time out there because the animals do go right across the boardwalk. The kids have built it. We had a wonderful builder, Josh Worthington, and he worked with us as we did segment by segment, because there would be a funding and then we'd run out of funding and there would be a delay, then he'd come back and do it again. So we're really grateful to have him, but the students helped all along the way. So there's a lot of ownership for the project, but there's also a lot of ownership in making it accessible. So the students are more aware of that. And it's certainly as we get the Braille signs out there and the sound boxes. Now this is the other outdoor classroom for IHT. Our volunteers have come out and they have worked many times trying, this is doing the outdoor classroom base, but in the middle you can see the high school now is putting up the railings, which they're using small sticks from the woods, working with the industrial art teacher, Eric Beachy. So the involvement goes far and wide. Again, different seasons. There's our fall and there's our spring, I do believe. So from beginning to end, we started, this is now the beginning over by the tennis courts where it's nice and wide. The 3 feet section is probably about a third of the nature trail, and it goes out to an area that goes around a yellow birch, and we're hoping to make that a little wider in the near future. Some of the other boardwalk is somewhat accessible, but and you get to these stairs and there's no way that anyone would be able to get up those stairs. So I think you'd have to turn around and go back to the beginning. Lots of involvement over the years, but it's been a wonderful project, and thinking about making it more accessible. There's a lot of grandparents that are coming out. There's a lot of people that just want a short walk that will come after school hours or on weekends. And I feel like building it, we had no idea how much use it would get, both by the students and the community. And the word is getting out more all the time, where it's getting used by people that maybe wouldn't be able to use one of our other trails.
That's right. And I think it's so nice you talk about grandparents. I mean, that's a huge thing that I don't think we always think about, is we live in the oldest state in the union, and we have a lot of wonderful community members who were avid outdoors people, and it's becoming more of a challenge for them to be on some of our trails. And so it's so nice for them to have these places to go with their grandkids and get to still really enjoy being out there and in nature and imparting what they know on their kids and their enthusiasm for nature. It's a huge, huge thing. Martha, do you want to talk a little bit about any thoughts Island Heritage Trust is having in general about accessibility?
Sure. No, it's definitely part of major conversations. We have some trails that are somewhat more accessible, like the Lily Pond has some wide trails over on the Quaco Road entrance where we can enter. And I think we could even make that a little bit better. So that one is fairly easy to think about, making it even more accessible than it is. Some of the others that we've been thinking about is even Settlement Quarry is a little bit steep, but my takeaways from the conference that Chrissy had organized, one of them was that people really want to get to unique places. It's so easy to do a walk maybe around a parking lot kind of thing where it's nice and flat, but you want to go to some gorgeous places or some unique places. So the Settlement Quarry would be certainly qualify for that. And then we're thinking about some different entrances. Our parking lot where they are now might not be the easiest entrance. So we have something Shore Acres is one place where the entryway is a little bit tricky, but if we entered another place, we might be able to make something a little more accessible. And we've also talked in the stewardship committee, making accessibility really a priority when you're looking at new properties. When talking to Alex, he's like, the best thing would be to get people out to the islands, because you know that experience you feel when you get out there, and we do have several islands. It would be quite a bit of work, but we're thinking about it. So maybe it will happen someday.
That's right. And thinking about it is the first step. So
it is. And
yeah.
Having these conversations, you know, we haven't done anything super formal, but having conversations all the time moves us forward with this and learning from others.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah. And as you know, Enoch Glidden would say, who if folks aren't familiar with Enoch, you'll see some photos of him in a bit. He works for Maine Trail Finder, and he's a wheelchair user and a huge advocate for accessibility in nature. And he says, you just do one thing, just make one little stretch of your trail a little bit easier, and then do a little more the next year. And pretty soon you'll have an accessible trail, or the way you do your programming or whatever that is. You don't have to, you know, do it all at once. You can take your time and do it really thoughtfully. So that's great.
Right. And Enoch is coming to the local schools to talk to the students. And I think that will be eye-opening for all of the community.
That's right. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. Well, I love your nature trail, and I love how it has become even more accessible than you thought it was going to for the community and things like that. And I think it just goes to show us that we're not always the best judge of what is and is not accessible, and what the community's wants and needs are. And sometimes things surprise us, like this webinar series, for example, that our two organizations did out of necessity when the pandemic hit in 2020. And then we realized, as a very happy accident, that it suddenly made our programming accessible to everybody in the community. And we had not thought about that as a motivator, but it definitely, I think, is the reason we've continued to do these webinars, now almost 3 years later. And so it's, it's really nice when you find those happy accidents, and it gets you thinking, what more could we be doing? So I think it's great. Martha, I was wondering if you could talk just for a minute about when you're working with a group, because you work with groups of students all the time. That's what you do.
Yes.
How do you think about creating programming so that everybody in the class can sort of have that same experience, regardless of what their abilities might be?
Well, if I know there's someone who has limited accessibility, I'll certainly make sure that we're not doing something that the other kids can do and one student cannot. So sometimes it's, just being a little closer to the trail, but there's so much you can do right on the trail. You were talking about those seed balls, and that's a perfect example of, you can still be out there and there's so much to do. A lot of the sensory pieces are something that comes right away, bringing things where they can feel things, close your eyes, blindfold someone and put something in their hand. There's different scents, make a natural perfume or cologne kind of thing with bayberries and wintergreen and things like that. So using some of the sensory things would be the first things that I would do. And staying close to the trail would be another. Listening, using your sense of hearing and hearing what's out there, because sometimes we go so fast that we need to just slow down and appreciate what's around us, because we like to move and go really, really fast. And sometimes you get a lot more out of life when you slow down and you take it all in.
That's right. Good. Well, thank you. Well, we can move swiftly along here to our next case study, which is My Land Trust, Blue Hill Heritage Trust. And one of the things that we started to really take on after our work with SUFU in 2017 was looking at doing more accessible trails. And we had partnered with a bunch of community members, businesses, and organizations in Blue Hill in an effort to help make the town, the village of Blue Hill, more pedestrian friendly. And so if anybody's driven down South Street in the last couple of weeks, there's a lot of construction, but it's a really, really good project because it's creating sidewalks, which we desperately need, and is going to make Blue Hill a more pedestrian friendly place. And so our part in that was to build an accessible trail that helped connect the schools to the village center, up towards the grocery store area, things like that. And so we had put in an accessible trail, which we opened in 2020. So that was our first sort of dip our toe in the water. And it was a very short trail, a little more than a quarter mile long, but it's a sweet, lovely trail that ends at an area with some benches, looking at some beautiful rock ledges with ferns and things like that. It's really lovely. And it goes out behind George Stevens Academy and the Congregational Church, if nobody has seen it. And we received so much feedback from the community about that trail that people were using it all the time. And it was people using strollers for their children. It was people just walking their dog in the morning. It was, maybe older folks after church would go for a nice walk because they didn't feel safe on the trails with all the roots and rocks. Definitely people who used wheelchairs, people who had vision impairments. We just heard from so many people, and we thought, whoa, okay, this is clearly a big need and something that people want in our community. So let's do some more. What more should we do? And so we really start thinking about accessibility in the beginning of a project rather than it being an afterthought of something, which I think is a huge thing that the community of people who live with disabilities are asking for, that they be included in these conversations, included in our thought process, much like Martha was saying, Alex and their awesome stewardship team is starting to do. And that's what we're starting to do as well. So this is one of the trails that followed the trail in Blue Hill, and this is the Meadowbrook Millstream Conservation Area, and it's located off the Bagaduce Road in Brooksville. And this trail was, talk about happy accidents, this is actually the site of a newly restored LY fish passage. And in order for the construction company to get back there and do the work they needed to do on the stream, they had to sort of put in this road. And they asked us what we wanted them to do after. Did we want it, reforested? And we said, actually, no, let's leave it and let's make it an accessible trail. And so that's what we did. And it's, it's not terribly long, but it's really pretty. And it goes back to this beautiful area that leads to Parker Pond. And so this whole area in the photo on your right is a meadow with a stream going through it. And the foliage this time of year, or maybe a couple weeks ago, is beautiful. And in the spring, you can see the alewife running up through. So it's a really, really beautiful spot. It is a place that wheelchairs can use. However, because it wasn't designed with accessibility in mind from the beginning, it does have some inclines that are a little steep and a little bit challenging for somebody in a manual wheelchair if they don't have somebody to help them. But anybody who's in a motorized chair or who walks, with a cane or is pushing a stroller would really have no problems on this trail. And I hope you'll go out and check it out soon. This is the trail in Blue Hill, the Murphy Trail that we created, and it has some really, really lovely features for such a short, sweet little trail, like these really beautiful bridges. And this trail connects with another trail that we have that goes from Parker Point Road all the way up to South Street, and it comes out in between Mainscape and the co-op. And so while we could not make that part of the trail totally accessible with this nice hard packed crushed gravel, because the incline was just so steep, and we actually don't own the land that trail is on. We just have a very narrow easement going up there. What we did do was we worked to make that trail more accessible for folks. So it may not be accessible for a wheelchair, but it is more accessible for people who maybe have some issues with balance and are a little nervous walking over roots and rocks. If you had ever been on this trail before we did this work, you know that you were always looking down at the ground when you were hiking this trail because the erosion was really, really bad on this trail. And so we covered every square inch of this trail with large crushed stone so it wouldn't be washed away, or boardwalk. And it has a long series of stairs like the one in the center photo that go all the way up to the top. And this trail is used by tons of kids who are maybe going to school at the Harbor School or the Bay School, or, you know, kids down at GSA or the Consolidated School popping up to the co-op for a snack after school, whatever it may be. A lot of families, just a lot of community members, a lot of folks who work at the hospital use this trail to go for a quick walk. And it really has become something that the community is using, and that a greater number of people in the community are able to use now as well, which is really exciting. The other trail that we did that we just opened this summer is the 100 Acre Wood Trail in Brooklyn. This is a trail that already existed, like the Parker Point South Street Trail. And I had actually been walking on this trail with my children and realized that the first long stretch of this trail was just an old woods road, and it was already quite level and kind of gravelly. And so I tapped my friend Jason Lepper, who had built the Murphy Trail in Blue Hill for us. And I asked him to come for a walk with me. And we went out and we figured that, you know, we could get a pretty good sized loop in there. And George Fields went out and he mapped it all out. And so what we did was we created a loop inside the loop at 100 Acre Wood. So those folks who still really enjoy 100 Acre Wood and like a 1.7 mile loop through the roots and rocks and trees still have that. But inside that, we have a shorter half-mile loop that is accessible and, you know, totally wheelchair friendly, even manual wheelchair. And it's such a beautiful area. You go out over a lot of ledgy area, in through forested area. There's tons of huckleberry, fruiting and flowering plants out there. It really is such a lovely, lovely space. So that's now something that folks in the community can enjoy. And it's a loop, which is nice because all the other two trails were just a one-way out and back. And we were hearing that feedback that everybody likes a loop better, I think. And so we decided, like, let's make this one a loop and really check that box off for ourselves. And our friend Dave Wardemowski, who cut the ribbon, had suggested that we create some special parking areas designated for people with accessibility. This is a property that did not have a ton of parking. And so we wanted to make sure that if somebody showed up using a wheelchair lift van or something like that, that they actually had a place where they could safely park off the road. And so we put in these 2 designated parking spots for folks with mobility issues. So that was really exciting. We were grateful to Dave for giving us that feedback, especially giving it to us when the contractors were still there and could whip it up really, really quickly. So this is what that trail loop looks like. And it goes right by a really significant vernal pool, which is another fun feature. And we're looking forward to being able to take school groups out here, much like Martha was showing with their trail. This is a great property to do school programming on. And so now we have a place that every child in the classroom can go to and have the same experience, the same field trip. We do a lot with vernal pools and, you know, that sort of spring migration. And so this is going to be a really, really great place to bring school groups and be able to make it a wonderful experience for everybody. So we've got a couple more projects in the works that we're really excited about. And one of them is Cooper Farm at Caterpillar Hill. And I'm sure most everybody knows Caterpillar Hill, and we have a really sweet little trail system that goes through the blueberry field and down into the woods. This is going to be a totally separate trail that actually goes in the upper part of the blueberry field and is going to allow folks to have a nice stroll, enjoy that view, and not be right on the road. And there will be a couple of areas where people can sit and enjoy the view at a picnic area, things like that. So this is what the site drawing looks like. And if you know Caterpillar Hill, it's a big slope. And so we definitely had to think about the grade of, you know, the inclines and things like that to make sure that it was at a suitable standard where somebody in a manual use wheelchair could very easily use and enjoy this path. And so we have work underway, and you can go check it out and see what they've done. I'll give a thank you and a shout out to Butler Smythe, who's been taking his drone out for us and getting some great footage for us of the process that's been working. And Erin and her team are doing such a great job out here, and we're really, really pleased. This is a new trail builder that we're working with, and she's doing such a great job. And this really required pretty significant, you know, machinery, stuff like that. She's going around rocks, having to move large rocks, things like that. And so she's doing a great job, and she's worked on some really large accessible trail projects elsewhere, sort of in the Northeast, and is doing a great job out there. This is a good view, bird's eye view of what it will look like at some of our viewing stations, where we will have places where people can step off the trail and sit and have a picnic, enjoy the view. We're going to have some nice interpretive signage up there, a horizon map. We will be having some signage that that really discusses the significant Wabanaki sort of past and present role in the area, and other things about the conservation effort, which was another collaboration between Island Heritage Trust and Blue Hill Heritage Trust, with Maine Coast Heritage Trust as a major partner as well. So this is going to be a really, really great project when it's done. There were so many people who helped make it possible, and we'll have some recognition there. We'll be naming the trail for longtime founding board member Peter Clapp. So we're really excited to open this trail up soon. And this is a great photo of her equipment, and you can see what goes into this. She's not, excuse me, she's not just carving into the land. They have to lay down stone, they have to lay down ground cloth, and then hard packed gravel. And so this really does take a lot of work and a lot of money. Excuse me. So this is an artist rendering of what the little viewing stations will look like. And you can see that from the beginning, we had accessibility in mind as we were creating this trail. Excuse me, I need to cough for one moment. Okay, so we're excited to have these picnic tables that are, you know, accessible for somebody to sit with their family and enjoy a meal with a view. And also these viewing stations and signage that is at the appropriate height so that somebody in a wheelchair can come right up to the signage and read it, and it's not right at their, you know, nose level as they're sitting in their chair. So the next project that we have that has not been started yet, but we're very excited to get going on it soon, is going to be accessibility down to the Eggemogan Reach. We recently acquired this Edge Hill property, which is in Sargentville, and we are going to be doing a path with a viewing platform at the end of that path that will stick out right here at this view where you see the sort of trees coming down, and there's the gorgeous Deer Isle Bridge in the background. People will be able to sit and watch, you know, the wooden boat regatta go by, or just go any old time and have a picnic and really have a nice time. This is going to be a pretty short, accessible path to start, but our hope is to eventually do a much longer, possibly even up to a mile-long accessible loop on this property. We're really, really hoping that that will happen. It will cost, over $120,000 for a project like that. So we're starting our planning and our fundraising now. But that is something that we want to do, is provide a trail and an option for folks that is a little bit longer, because that's another thing that we know people sometimes are unhappy with accessible trails, is they tend to be really short. And, accessible trails are very expensive to build. So we're hoping that we can provide at least one trail that really has a nice length to it. So stay tuned for the Edge Hill Trail. We are very excited. It's such a beautiful, beautiful place. So one of the things that we've been doing as an organization to not just be accessible with our properties and our lands is including the voices of folks who are living with various disabilities in these conversations, in these decisions, in this work. And so nothing about us without us is sort of this really famous rallying cry that came out of the disabled community in the 90s. And we've adopted this, and when I say we, I mean sort of the greater land trust community is adopting this as a way to ensure that we are including their voices in our decisions, because we may not always be the best judge of things. And it really can be helpful for us if we are including them to not make mistakes and waste time, waste money, waste efforts. And so we have at the Heritage Trust, we have formed an accessibility advisory committee. And it's made up of a diverse group of people who all have a different sort of barrier to access. And those people may be wheelchair users. They may have a degenerative disease or something like MS or fibromyalgia, where they deal with pain and exhaustion. It may be somebody who has 3 small children at very different ages and very different abilities. And it may be somebody who, as my friend Callie Curtis says, is temporarily abled, who is, getting older, slowing down, and being a little more careful about where they go hiking. And so this group is auditing all of the trails that Blue Hill Heritage Trust has, and they're letting us know on these sheets that you see on the bottom of the screen there, how the trail was for them. So this was filled out by Cheryl. She uses a cane, and she was rating the trail or a section of trail on a scale based of her as a user of somebody who uses a cane. And she gives lots of good feedback and comments. So we're going to be taking all these audit forms from these various members of our committee, and we're going to be using them to help us not only learn more about our properties through the eyes of people who have, access issues, but to also change the language that we are using when we are describing our properties. One of the biggest things that I have learned is that we are not living in a, if you build it, they will come situation here. We are in a situation where if you build it and you let people know that it's there and you describe it appropriately so that they know what to expect when they get there, then they will come. And so it really is on us to be letting people know what to expect when they roll in the parking lot of a place. So it's not enough to just say this is an accessible trail, because accessibility is not a cookie cutter word. It means very different things to different people. And so you need to describe what the accessible features are. Sometimes we use terms like universally accessible, and that's a little bit dangerous simply because it infers that literally every single person in the universe could use that trail. And you're probably going to find at least somebody who can't. And you would hate to have that one person show up at your property and be disappointed. And so it's really important to include these folks who are living this experience that I personally am not at the moment, to help me learn how to best describe the trails or the programming that we are offering at Blue Hill Heritage Trust. So by including these voices, we're really ensuring more success for us in these programs. So these are some photos. Enoch Glidden came to review some of our trails for Maine Trail Finder. He goes all around the state of Maine and he checks out accessible trails or trails that are deemed easy, and he reviews them for Maine Trail Finder so that anybody who is going on to Maine Trail Finder can see through his perspective what that trail was like. And he really encourages others to leave notes and comments on Maine Trail Finder about their experience as well. So my committee met with Enoch and we went and we visited all the accessible sites, both current and future, with him. And we all walked them together and, sort of talked about them. And he gave us really good reviews, which was really exciting and great. He likes the gravel we use, which is important. And, one of the things that I really like about having groups of people go out who are using these, these devices like wheelchairs or canes or strollers is that they can give you firsthand sort of experience and anecdotes. So in the top right corner here, you see my friend Dave's wheelchair. This was not an accessible trail. This was just an area that we had gone in the day that had a gravel parking area. And some people might think that all gravel is created equal. And Dave will tell you that it's definitely not, because he was most definitely stuck here. And it took two of us to help him get out. And he has a pretty sturdy motorized wheelchair. And so this is why you include folks in the conversation, because it really helps show you before you spend a bunch of money on gravel that is not going to work for the audience that you're intending it for, that you can make better choices at the outset. And it also helps you justify it to, funders who you're writing grants to and things like that. This is an example of programming that we did with SUFU, and this was a really, really fun project. This was a community blueberry picking event that we were doing with the folks at SUFU. So again, this is the advocacy group for adults with developmental disabilities. And with this program, this was not a program that I planned and coordinated for this group. This was a program that was a collaboration between our two organizations. And the goal of this was to invite everybody in the community to come out to a big blueberry picking event at Caterpillar Hill and encourage people to take berries home to feed their families and enjoy, but also to donate some of what they picked to the food pantry so that they could give those berries to those who are facing food insecurity, and sometimes for whom blueberries would be an expense that they can't afford. And so we had this event, and right from deciding what to do for an event, deciding who was going to do what thing, how the event was going to be run, everything, it was a total collaboration. And we had members of SUFU who maybe were nonverbal, who had a job, and they were participating just as much as I was participating. And it was a really wonderful event that we got to do with them. A lot of community members came out. Judy Hilliker's there accepting the berries on behalf of the food pantry. And what was really cool about this was some of the SUFU chapter members would tell us that they're always the ones who need help from the community to live their lives. And it felt really good for them to be the ones helping others in need. And that's really empowering for people. And that's, worth accessibility alone, is just to help empower people in our communities who oftentimes are not. This, as Martha alluded to earlier, is another example of how we think about programming. So this was an event that I did many years in a row with first graders at the Blue Hill Consolidated School, where they would make these seed balls and launch them into this field in the middle of town to help grow milkweed for monarch butterflies. And normally the kids would go charging into the field and scatter their seeds everywhere. But because we had a student who was using a wheelchair, we didn't even talk about going in the field. The plan was we were going to line up and we were going to launch our seed bombs into the field, which the kids loved and had a great time. And it made it so that the experience was exactly the same for every student who was there, including the student who was using the wheelchair. And so that's something that we're thinking about more and more with our programming, and making sure that the teachers know that if they have a student who has any sort of disability, that that's something that we really embrace and we want to work with, rather than excluding that student. All of this work is gaining a lot of attention around the state. And so we're getting a lot of great media coverage. We, as Martha said, I helped coordinate with Maine Coast Heritage Trust and co-author of the guide, Peter Doering, the first statewide accessibility workshop for land trusts. And it happened last month in October in Brunswick. And the land trusts around the state really rallied and came out for this. We were sold out. People heard from different land trusts and groups who were great case studies, including Martha and Mickey, and George Fields was there for Blue Hill Heritage Trust with Andrew, our trail manager, talking about, you know, the projects that we are all doing around the state so that we can be a model and a resource for other land trusts who are thinking about getting involved in this work. The conference went really, really well, and it's the first of many. We're not just doing a one and done. We're going to keep talking about this at the state level, at the regional level, at the national level, because we know that this is a really critical part of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. We also are getting a lot of good coverage in local newspapers who are covering this work. We have, had some community members who are concerned about the environmental impact of putting in accessible trails, or who just are used to a trail looking a certain way, and it's hard for them when they show up and that trail is different, which I understand. And so we've had, our friends in the media have been really, really great about covering these things, and not just interviewing me and talking to people like me or Martha or George Fields, but actually talking to the people who this is benefiting and who are affected, by these accessible trails for the good. And so this has been really nice to get this coverage and to hear from the folks who are, for the first time, able to go out in the woods in Blue Hill and use these trails, or on the peninsula and use these trails. It's a huge, huge thing. We hear from people on social media all the time, and we love it. And it really helps us understand why we're doing this work, the urgency behind this work. And it helps us realize that a lot of times these folks go unseen in our communities because it's so hard for them to get around or be a part of what we're doing. And it does not mean that they are not there. And so these are just some comments that people have sent to us on Facebook or put in the comment section on a Facebook post that we've done, or that, our contractor, Jason Lepper, is really proud of the work he's done with us. So some of these are lifted off of his Facebook posts, but one in particular, I love that one of these folks actually tagged Blue Hill Heritage Trust and said, this is your call to action. Like, we hope you see this message. We need this in our community. It's so nice. And, to point out that, they have an aunt that's going to be visiting and they're going to use that trail with them. It doesn't always have to be strictly for people using wheelchairs. There are so many different types of disabilities out there. Dave Wordamowski went out and previewed our trail and was really excited because he was an avid hiker. He used to hike Blue Hill Mountain all the time and desperately misses that. And so it's great to be able to provide folks with Dave, these places to go. Other good reminders, like, a sister who fell and broke their arm. Sometimes this is not a permanent disability. This is something that is just temporary in our lives. And we all really can benefit from having these trails out there. So I really appreciate when people are giving us this feedback, giving us these comments. It really helps us, and it helps us when we're going to funders to try to fund these programs, when we are talking amongst ourselves or to our boards about the importance of these programs, to know the impact it is having on our community, because accessibility matters. This is my stepdad, Dennis King, who he passed away a few years ago, but he had a stroke. He was a farmer. He was outside all the time, and he had this debilitating stroke. And the only place that we could take him to go for a walk was in Orono at the Bog Walk. And I wish he was here today, because now I have a bunch more places that I could take Dennis, and he would have loved them. So accessibility is super important. And thank you for listening to us. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, throw them our way. But otherwise, thanks for being here. This is a passion of ours, and we're grateful that you tuned in. Martha, any closing remarks or thoughts? Oh, you're muted.
Bravo to you for all these new trails. There's some I haven't even been on, so I'm excited to get out there. And thinking about all these, in inviting people that you think maybe don't get out as often. I think it's nice to give people the opportunity to just come and see it for the first time and maybe be led a little bit, but then they'll be able to come on their own. So I'm going to take that to heart. And some of the trails I'm thinking are great for environmental education because they are so wide. And instead of having like a long trail with 20 kids way off in the distance, it's easier to circle them up and do activities along the way. So a lot of perks along the way. Yeah. And a lot of work yet to be done, but we take it one day at a time, and we keep chipping away at it. And we're enthusiastic. So, and I know you guys are too. And it's just wonderful to see so many land trusts in our region starting to pick up this work. It really is a game changer, because access to nature is a right that everybody should have. And the benefits of nature are not in question for any of us. So yeah, we all should have that. Good. All right, well, I guess we'll close it off there, but thank you so much. And again, this is a really fun collaborative webinar series we do between our two organizations, Island Heritage Trust and Blue Hill Heritage Trust. And we can only do this because of the support of our donors. So please consider lending your support to either, or actually both. How about both of our organizations? If you enjoyed this programming, and check out our YouTube page, because all the other webinars are up there as well. So thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to stop recording.